Hey everyone, it's Lexie. So in today's video, I'll be doing another book unhaul. I know I did one back in December, and usually towards the end of every year, I like to kind of go back and just clean up my shelves so that I like them to better reflect me as a reader. I know some people like to hold on to every book that they've read, but for me, I want my shelves to reflect who I am, and I have very limited space now, so I want my shelves to really reflect me and what I've really enjoyed reading. So I did another scope through of my shelves because, like I said, we are kind of running out of space here. So I was like, okay, I'll bring these to Half Price Books on Saturday. My boyfriend and I will go. He will help carry this ginormous bag for me. I think there's probably a dozen or so books in here that I will be kind of sending off to Half Price Books. So yeah, without further ado, let's get started. So starting up, I first have Britt-Marie Was Here by Fredrik Backman. After reading Beartown and loving it, I purchased all of his other books. I've loved the Beartown trilogy. I did not like A Man Called Ove, and this was one that was on my shelf that I just don't think I will get to. I think my grandmother, I'm looking on my shelf now because this title is very long. I still need to read Anxious People, and my grandmother asked me to tell you that she's sorry. I think were the ones that kind of really are ones that I am curious and interested in wanting to read, and this was one that for whatever reason just didn't really resonate with me when I was reading the summary. And it, like I said, I've never even like flipped through this book. It's never been used, so it could get for like someone can, I'd rather give it to someone who would enjoy it. Next up, this is a book that I read back in 2016 or 2017, right when it kind of came out, and even then I didn't really like this, and now especially with it becoming very popular on Book Talk, they now announced that it's going to be a movie, and I've just I'm like, I don't want to have this book on my shelf. It really kind of rubs me the wrong way, especially this author too in general. And It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. Like I said, I read this when it first came out. I remember it was during my master's, so it was 2016, 2017. And yeah, I think this book is problematic. I think this author is problematic and kind of romanticizing abusive relationships, and I can understand like the meaning. I think this one she kind of based on kind of a personal experience, whether it was her mother's or her own, I don't remember, but I feel like there is still kind of the glorification and romanticization of these kind of toxic men, and I think that can be very problematic, especially to a younger audience. Yeah, especially how they did basically a coloring book that they were going to do for this book in particular, but it's a book about domestic violence, and that is not okay, so they rightfully scrapped that after they announced it. But yeah, I think Colleen Hoover is just a very problematic author, and I just don't want her work on my shelf. Next, I have In a Dark, Dark Wood by Ruth, Ware. Again, this is a book that I read during my master's, and it just didn't blow me away. From what I remember, it's about this girl who wakes up at her friend's hen's party and doesn't remember. She wakes up in the woods and doesn't remember what's going on, and so she's trying to recount the events of the past day. And I was able to kind of guess the plot, or the plot twist, relatively early on. Yeah, it just didn't blow me away, and it's one that I wouldn't want to reread, so I'd rather, like I said, just have it not take up space on my shelves. This was a book that I read last year that I just found to be very disappointing, and like I said, it's been on my this top shelf where I just keep miscellaneous paperbacks, and I must have missed it when I did my kind of comb through of books at the end of last year, and it is The Book of Lost Names by Kristin Harmel. I think this book had a tremendous premise. I think it had a lot of good potential, but the execution of it was just it follows this girl who ends up kind of living in Nazi-occupied France during World War II, and essentially she ends up becoming a part of the resistance, and she records the names of children who are being smuggled out of France to Switzerland. And so she's recording down their names because they'll be living under another false identity. And so I thought that premise could have been really well done. It just sounded really good, but I felt like it kind of turns into a romance essentially, and kind of a whirlwind romance where it wasn't believable. It was just very quick, and everything that happened was just very predictable. And yeah, like I said, the premise of this just sounds like it will be good, but for me, the execution just kind of fell flat. Next, this is a series that overall I've really enjoyed, but I think I've just lost interest in it over the years, and it's definitely one that I don't want to either, like, I don't want to pick up again, or I'm just not wanting to continue on. It's kind of both of those, and it is the Charles Jenkins series by Robert Dugoni. I love his Tracy Crosswhite series, and this is kind of like a spy espionage-esque series. So I think he's like former CIA who ends up get dragged back into the criminal investigation stuff in there. And I feel like this author did a really good job at the cat and mouse game, where you follow the different perspectives and you really feel like you were a part of the chase between the good guy and the bad guy. Like, I felt like I was watching like a James Bond, like I felt like I was reading a James Bond like movie, basically, is how it felt like, which I really enjoyed. For me, it was stepping outside my comfort zone, but I think with the second one too, that just kind of gets very old very quickly, kind of that on your toes, you know, cat and mouse-esque kind of narration. And even though I did enjoy these, I just don't think it's something that I want to continue on reading. I think they're really good, but I just don't want to continue on with this series, and I don't think it'll be something that I will pick up again in the future, so I'd rather give this to a good home. Next up, this was probably one of my most disappointing reads of the year so far, and I was like, I don't like it, I can just throw it in with my half-price books pile, and it is The Stories We Tell by Joanna Gaines. This book is not a memoir, it's not a self-help book, so like, what's the premise of this book? There really isn't one. You just need to read the introduction, and that's all you get. It's talking about how she was bullied in high school but ended up becoming like homecoming queen or whatever, but she doesn't really talk about what got her there to be kind of stepping outside her comfort zone. She just kind of talks in circles and repeats the same thing over and over and over again, just in different ways. Yeah, it was just boring. And like I said, I don't think this book knows what it wants to be, and I felt like the advertising and the title were misleading as well. Like, The Stories We Tell seems like it's like a memoir, and it wasn't what I was expecting, and it was just very disappointing, and I don't want to have this on my shelf anymore. So this is a series that I'm very sad to put in here, but I gave it 2 tries, kind of really close to each other, and it just did not live up to my expectations of it. And it is the Evan Sterling series by Barbara Nickless. I had high hopes for this. I love her Sydney Parnell series, so I had really like high expectations going into this, especially feeling so connected to Sydney, the character she created. So I was really excited to kind of dive into this one, and for me it just fell flat. A lot of the mysteries are kind of based in kind of archaeology history type, because Evan Sterling is a semitologist, so he reads the signs left at murder scenes that help you kind of identify the murderer. That sounds like it would be really interesting, and you can tell the author put in a lot of research into being historically accurate, but it just felt very info dumpy. It would kind of take away from the pacing overall. Like, it would just be, you'd get this like 4-page monologue from some, you know, Viking expert, and it just goes on and on, where it's like, this is too much. It kind of had that pacing issues where that kind of took me out, and I feel like Evan as a character isn't compelling enough for me to really kind of feel connected to him. I felt like I was at arm's length between him and then Addie, who's supposed to be like a very, you know, strong supporting character, and she's barely in this second one. So I gave it a second shot, and yeah, I was just very disappointed in this one. Next up, these were 2 books that I read a couple years ago, and they were just okay. Like, they weren't bad, but I just don't remember them, and I think they were just like 3-star reads for me. So they weren't bad, but I didn't really was blown away by them. And I know they're like different World War II style stories, and they were like I said, they weren't bad, but they weren't, if I were to compare them to The Nightingale or Lilac Girls or any of those great historical fictions that I truly love, this one just doesn't, you know, meet that standard, and I'd rather give these to a better home that would appreciate them. And finally, these are two books that I've been holding on to that I'm like, you know what, I don't think I need these. And it is The Official Companions for the Crown, Volume 1 and Volume 2. I do find the history aspect in these to be very interesting, and kind of giving you a background into not only what was kind of more historically accurate, but also kind of the leeways the show took, which I do find very interesting. I do find that historical aspect to be very interesting, but I don't think this is going to be one that I'm necessarily going to want to read. I think if there was something like I had a question about, I would just like Google it or watch the TV show, because I think that would just be much more interesting. Like I do enjoy the historical aspects in here, but especially for like, you can tell like this one was like much more research, like there's just more things in here and like the actual like history, and the font is, you know, reasonable, like a normal font. But then if you go to Volume 2, you could tell that they were probably really struggling to like add stuff, and this font is massive. Before my LASIKs, I probably could see it without my glasses on, like at least here. That's how big this font is, and my eyesight was really bad prior to LASIK, but you can tell that they were really struggling to get things into this novel, and like it basically ends here because the rest is like references. So I don't think you're really getting your money's worth. If anything, I would just rather, even though I know it's fictionalized, I'd rather watch the TV series over reading this, or just doing a quick, you know, Google search. So that's it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this unhaul. So I think there's roughly like 14 books here that I'll just be bringing to half price books. I feel like that's my go-to, especially now that I'm on the book buying ban. I've been doing a really good job at sticking to that, focusing on taking down my TBR, and it feels good too to make more space for the books as I read them off my TBR to actually place them on my shelves. And it's always nice just to get a little bit of, you know, extra money in my pocket for getting these to half price books. So yeah, like I said, I'm sad that some of these books I'm letting go, but at the end of the day, like I said, I want my books to really reflect me, and yeah, I think this is the best thing for my shelves and just trying to be more organized. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye guys.